Ian, you ready? Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening for our third lecture of this year. I want to give a big thanks to AIA Nebraska, who serves as our partner in the design lecture series, as well as a huge thank you to all of our sponsors for their support, which has allowed us to bring in some really great speakers. Huge thanks to Coldspring and Matt out there for being this evening's food and beverage host. Woohoo! Yep, whoop it up. If you're an architect and need CEU credits, there's a QR code sheet out there at the Coldspring table. You can scan that after the lecture to get your CEUs. Let's see. And lastly, I also have some posters out there if anyone needs to grab those for their office. We have 2 more lectures after tonight. We have Tom Main coming up in October, and then Anna Ives, she'll be speaking in November. All right, let me introduce tonight's speaker. Takashi Yanai is a partner and residential studio director at Ehrlich, Yanai, Ray, Cheney Architects, based in Los Angeles and San Francisco. They are also a recipient of the 2015 AIA Firm Award. Takashi is a longtime member and former chair of the AIA Committee on Design Knowledge Committee. Currently, he is the chair of the SF MoMA Architecture and Design Accessions Committee. Prior to practice, Takashi was a design journalist and editor at GA Houses in Tokyo, where his work and travels provided the seeds for his design philosophy. Today, his work is rooted in a contemplative relationship to landscape in the California modernist tradition, infused with inspiration drawn from Japan. In 2017, he was elevated to the AIA College of Fellows in recognition of his residential work, which articulates how architecture can connect man and nature through masterful siting and exceptional craft. Please welcome Takashi.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to crack open my water because I know I'll need it. Thank you for coming to the VIP preview of my lecture. And thank you all for observing the 6-foot social distancing that we're required for tonight's event. Happy to be here. Thank you, Omaha. It's my first time here. Every time I'm in the Midwest, I'm blown away by many, many things. The last time I was out here was close to here, 2 hours away. Here is Des Moines, Iowa. I gave a lecture probably 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. It was my first lecture ever. I totally bombed. So hopefully I can make up for that. So Omaha, amazing, the home of the Reuben, Butterbrickle ice cream, Ed Richet, which I learned today, visiting the Jocelyn Museum, Tom Prince and things he's doing at Maple Street with Ross and Mike, and also Warren Buffett. Not necessarily in that order, but maybe. So I'm Takashi Yanai, partner at Ehrlich Yanai Reed Cheney Architects. We're in LA with a little outpost in San Francisco. So let me show the gang. Uh-oh. There we go. So we're based in LA. This is us, about a 40-person firm. We work in all sorts of building types. O is in the modern idiom, in the sort of legacy of California modernism. Even though we do university work, commercial work, GSA work, all of it, my studio focuses mostly on residential. So that's what I'll be sharing today, is the residential projects. So some through lines through the work are like simplicity. I like to say it's not minimalism, it's simple architecture. It's as simple as should be, not more than it should be. And there's a sort of reverence to nature, however you can bring it in. Just having a little view of green, a little view of the sky, contemplative, peaceful space, not overly adorned, providing a backdrop, honestly, to the clients who live there. And then there's also this attention to craft. I'm not following Ross's rule, no ums. I'll try to keep them to a minimum. This is a job site in Palo Alto. I'll show the house that it was for. And I'm in huge appreciation of the teamwork that is required for our work. So this is rough framing, obviously. Some of the nicest rough framing you might see in Palo Alto. It just speaks to the amount of pride that people who build, who realize the things that architects and clients envision. It takes a team. So this is a little alcove that was built into the rough framing, not out of necessity, but because these workers show up to work every day for a year or 2 years. And it reminded me of a Japanese sort of design element called a tokonoma, which is an art alcove, always designed to hold a vessel and maybe some flora to mark the occasion or the passing of the seasons. So I just showed up on the job site one day, and amazingly, there was this beautiful vase with flowers on it. It spoke to me. Houses to me also are not precious objects. This is a reference to a poem. As mentioned, I was a journalist once upon a time. I was actually an English major, not an architecture major at Berkeley. One of my favorite poems is a poem called Anecdote of Bajar by Wallace Stevens, written about 100 years ago. And I don't remember it, so I'm going to spare you a poetry reading, but I'll paraphrase. And basically, it's about placing a jar in the wilderness. So to me, it is a metaphor for what architects do. What we're doing is providing artificial environments within a natural environment. So to me, architecture is like this jar. This jar, depending on where it's placed in the wilderness, creates a point of view. It's a reference point. It frames the wilderness. It gives a framework. But it's also a way where we can locate ourselves in Omaha or Nebraska or the United States or in the universe. It is also a vessel. So unto itself, a house or a jar is empty. It's nothing without its contents. So similarly to a jar without its M&Ms or strawberry jam or whatever it is that you're going to have in there, a house is nothing without its clients and the lives that happen inside. So I'm going to be talking about various references in the work. This is a triptych of photographs by one of my favorite artists. His name is Hiroshi Sugimoto. Born in Japan, not far from where my family is from, trained at Art Center in LA, not far from where I grew up. These are images of the Schindler House on Kings Road. This architecture series that Sugimoto did is about finding the essence of architecture. So there's something in the building that he's trying to capture through kind of squinting or blurring. And to me, the Kings Road House is very special. So I was thrilled to see that Sugimoto would spend the energy to take a triptych of the project. Kings Road House, for me and many others in LA, is ground zero of California modernism. Designed by Rudolf Schindler, an acolyte of Frank Lloyd Wright, came to the United States a little over 100 years ago. And this is his first project on his own. And to me, it is the epitome of many things, including Japanese architecture, including California native architecture. There's something about it that has this cross-cultural feeling. So Frank Lloyd Wright predates him, Hollyhock House in Los Angeles. Frank Lloyd Wright is doing the Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. He's coming back with staff architects from Japan. They're sharing stories about Japanese architecture with Schindler. And I would like to think that Schindler absorbed some of those lessons. And some of those lessons done across the Pacific Ocean in Japan seemed to him appropriate to experiment with in California. And it's an endless source of inspiration for me as someone born in Japan, grown up in Los Angeles. I like to use the work as a way to mitigate those two cultural roots of mine. not in an explicit way, but in a conceptual way. So we're going to dive into some projects now. This is Blue Sail in Pacific Palisades, another photograph by my favorite artist, Hiroshi Sugimoto. This is from his Seascape series. Some of you may be familiar. It's all about the sky and the sea, a perfect balance, yin, yang, however, glass half full, glass half empty, however you want to look at it. These are 3 of the series. It's about an infinite number of ways in which we can experience a simple thing, like the horizon line. So this is the house that I showed up at when my potential client called me in the Palisades. A very simple developer kind of tract house. You would never guess that it was on the rim of the Pacific Ocean. This sort of generic design didn't understand what this site had. So what we did is pared it back. This was an exercise in restraint. The first thing we wanted to do is make sure that the front door did not face the street, so that when a client comes home, they're able to use these walls and these gardens as veils to sort of shed their daily stresses as they come home. So you walk past the walls and you come to this contemplative garden that I think of as a California climate appropriate Zen garden. So in Japan you would see completely different flora, maybe only rocks, but I felt that this was sort of a perfect blend of this climate appropriate palette and this idea of a contemplative garden, so that you would pass by this every day as you come home. Originally the house, when you walked in, this is the entry vestibule. There was a living room, there's a dining room, there's a kitchen, there's a powder room, there's an office, there is a laundry room. Very clogged up, mishmash of partitions. There's a fireplace in the view of the Pacific Ocean that made no sense to me. But I felt that the bones were not badly located on the site. So instead of tearing it down and doing everything, all we did was remove the interior partitions to create a much more seamless environment. And as you see, by eliminating that barrier between the interior and exterior, we're really highlighting for this house the relationship to the Pacific Ocean. So this is kind of the view as you walk in. So contrast that to the view I showed of the existing. As soon as you walk past that contemplative garden, open the front door, this is what you're confronted with. So the architecture, again, is not about adornment or embellishment. It's about providing a quiet frame for the greatest asset on the site, which is the horizon line of the Pacific Ocean. And then in that jar, in that empty vessel, you fill it with furniture that's appropriate to the client. And then you can imagine then, when the architect has gone home, the client is throwing dinner parties or enjoying a quiet night at home. So this is from the ocean side. This is a glimpse into the great room, combining all those rooms that I described before into a single space. These doors, you see the tracks of the doors, they pocket away. So it's a seamless environment between interior and exterior. They enjoy every day the sunrise, believe it or not, because of the interesting sort of situation of the Pacific Palisades. And this client in particular works in downtown LA, but she rushes home every day to beat rush hour so she can enjoy the various aspects of sunset every day. This next house is a house in Venice, California. So again, in our work, a through line, whether explicitly or implicitly, is this kind of relationship between California architecture and Japanese architecture. This is an image of Katsura Palace, who Walter Gropius, among others, visited, again, almost 100 years ago, and saw in it parallels with European Bauhaus architecture. Spectral Bridge House. This is in Venice, California, in a small infill lot. This was a collaboration with light and space artist Johannes Giordoni. This is it from the streetscape. If you're familiar with Venice, the lots are very tiny, 4,000 square feet, right on the sidewalk. What we wanted to create was a very quiet structure for the lives within and also for the art. We chose specifically a white integral color stucco and a black shosugiban, which is a Japanese material. It's a charred wood. We chose the black and white palette specifically since it was a light and space artist. White is the combination of all color. Black is no color, I guess. As far as pigments go, if we're talking about pigments now, black is the combination of all pigments and white is the absence of them. So again, it's about this sort of seamless integration of indoors and outdoors. That is a courtyard that's right on the opposite side of that Core 10 fence from the sidewalk. I think of that outdoor space as an outdoor room. And I think of the way that we furnished, or the client has furnished this interior space as an interior landscape. Again, it's neither this nor that. A preview of some of the other things I'm going to be showing. Note the pattern of the shadow of the trees on that wall back there, and note also the materiality of this entry vestibule. I'd like to show you a little bit about what this collaboration between the architecture and the art means. So this is the house during the day. You get a little hint of that purple outline of the hallway in the right side image, but at night it takes on a completely different character. Again, inspired by Dan Flavin and James Turrell. The artist has put this art intervention on a 24-hour, 365-day algorithm that is constantly changing the intensity and color of the light. It's quite the show for the neighbors. This is the art lounge that is up top. It's on the second floor of a volume. This is a bridge that functionally provides a connection between the main space and the primary bedroom beyond. But as you can see, there's this sort of Dan Flavin sort of nod to this lineage of art and space art. And at night, these spaces take on a completely different character. Spring Road. So this is a house in Marin County. So that's just across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco in a town called Ross. And to me, it is an ode to Mount Fuji. There is a series of woodblock prints called, I think it's 36. Maybe I'm getting the number wrong, but I think it's 36 Views of Mount Fuji by Hokusai. And it's all about kind of understanding your place in the world relative to this landmark. So in our case, the landmark in Marin County is Mount Tamalpais. This site is at the top of a knoll. It's an ecotone, what we call an ecotone. It's this particular spot that is the transition between one microclimate and another. On this side, it's the shady side, California, old growth California redwoods. This is as we approach the house. So I like to think that we're not bad at what we do. I love this house a lot, but we never lost sight of the fact that the most impressive asset that this particular client will ever have from this particular point in the universe is Mount Tamalpais, not the architecture. So the architecture is quiet, it's being respectful of the environment. Even the color of the terracotta cladding is in reference to the color of the barks of the trees and the surroundings. So again, the architecture is a side piece. It's playing second fiddle to what is amazing about this particular place on the planet, Mount Tamalpais, not to beat a dead horse. Views that are framed by our architecture, ever mindful of it. This is a study, a view from the primary bedroom. But just to prove that we weren't completely 100% obsessed with one thing, you see that the architecture is a collection of volumes that are stacked, composed appropriately. We also like to, as I mentioned before, blur the boundary between interior space and exterior space. So you can see that the living room, for instance, ties into the geometry of the deck. Not the exact same species of wood, of course, but the geometry of it dialed in. So even on a cold Marin morning, you can have the doors closed, but you feel that expanse into the landscape. Some interior views. And again, what we're providing, architecture is the static thing that's animated by the clients, the people, the activities that happen within. But it's also the thing against which we measure our place on the planet. Every day is a different condition on the site. So these are just shots I took during construction to illustrate that. So this project is called Waverly. So this is a house we did in Palo Alto. This house is about several things, but I wanted to introduce this kind of thought. I gave a little preview of it with Spectral Bridge, that image of the shadow on the walls. So there's a Japanese concept called komorebi, which is about this sort of ever-changing, evanescent sense of light as it comes through the trees. So this house, to me, is about this conversation between nature and light and architecture. So the house we use as a primary material, the Peterson brick from Denmark, as a perfect backdrop to this phenomenon of dappled light through the leaves. In Palo Alto, we're blessed with mature trees. So in this case, we inherited 3 beautiful California live oaks. I convinced the client to go for our landscape design in collaboration with Blazing Landscapes, ginkgo trees. Because in California, sometimes we forget that there are seasons, and that to me is an unfortunate thing. So I wanted to bring in a sense of seasonality in the landscape. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is because this particular handmade brick has flashes of ochre in the brick that you might not notice during, let's call it 90% of the year, but when the ginkgo trees turn yellow in October, I think it is, and are on the trees for about a couple weeks before they fall to the ground, it lets that ochre color in the brick really pop. So the architecture, static object, has this animated quality in relationship to nature. You can see a little bit of the ochre in the close-up of the brick on the right. So I mentioned the mature oak trees in the back. So this particular house has a front house and a back house. We thought of the yard in between the two. Again, it's an outdoor room under this beautiful canopy. So you see the space in between the two structures. Oh, wait. I forgot to tell one story. You'll see on the right the living room, on the left is the primary suite. We really did not want to disturb the trees, so as the primary suite extends into the backyard in order to create privacy, we were getting awfully close to the tree, so you can see that that room in particular is lifted up, so it's cantilevering over the roots of the tree, so we can nestle up against it without harming it. A little sense of the materiality. The other thing I love in Palo Alto is a pretty hardcore dedication to craft. And then in this case, materiality. So the wood slatted ceiling, the brick that's brought from indoors to outdoors. Again, orienting the house so the dappled light comes into the house. A view of the stair. This house has an interesting feature, which is this deployable chainmail veil. In the cases where they want to have a dinner party and maybe there's a caterer in the kitchen or there's a mess in the kitchen and you want to create a separation between kitchen and living room, you can deploy this veil. But one of the things we wanted to do with it was use it as an opportunity for the architecture to speak to this idea of komorebi and the dappled light. So you can see That's when it's open on the left, and on the right when it's deployed at those particular times of day. It has that quality of filtered light, this beautiful filtered light. The only second-story room, only room on the second floor is the study. So again, I mentioned Palo Alto. We enjoy these beautiful, beautiful mature trees. So it was conceived of as a tree house that enjoys various conditions, but one is when the drapes are drawn, for when the sunlight is too strong. The drapes, again, versus roll-down shades, provides this sort of dappled light, seemed appropriate for the spirit of the house. And when you wanted to, you drew the drapes, and you felt like this was a series of like Japanese ink drawings in color of a beautiful landscape. So even in spaces like the primary bath, we wanted to create this sense of access to light and nature. Even here, just sort of dialing in this kind of relationship between how light enters the space and the craft of the architecture. So these are maybe not quite ready for prime time, but I wanted to share these. These are two recent projects. This one called Baxter, which is in Silver Lake on the east side of Los Angeles. And this house was very much about the exploration of materials. Baxter is a house for a son of one of my first clients. He grew up in Beverly Hills. Those of you who know LA would recognize that Silver Lake is in many ways the antithesis of Beverly Hills. So he stuck with the same architect. I'm very grateful, but he wanted to do something very different than what we had designed for his parents. So he wanted, that house is white. His mother was a painter, white, beautiful gallery walls. So for him, we wanted to create a black house. That was very much about materiality. So here you see on the left the two primary materials. It's a custom-made black CMU block that we're sort of manipulating to create light and shadow in the tradition of mid-century modern architecture. And then on top is, again, that burnt wood material, the Shosugiban. But we did a riff on it, which was to not take it vertically, but do it diagonally. It's quite a remarkable site. Baxter happens to be the steepest street in Los Angeles County. And it belonged to an estate for which the primary house was this pink sort of villa-like structure in the back. Our client acquired two properties in front of that villa. So this is the sense of it. You'll see in a second that Baxter faces the Silver Lake Reservoir, so it's not quite the Pacific Ocean, but it's a water view. Very much solid and private from three sides, but on the reservoir side, it's very open. So private rooms upstairs, a very open, great room, so living, dining, kitchen, sitting room on the ground floor. Again, the doors pocket away, so there's a seamless continuation between interior space and exterior space. So view the reservoir, you get a little glimpse of the reservoir in the middle of the photo. And again, we brought this manipulated custom concrete block CMU. So it's a black pigment. We took all the aggregate out of it that had any hint of color to keep it monochromatic. And then also through a grasshopper algorithm, created this sort of varied pattern so it could have a little play in relationship to the light during the course of the day. So a little bit about the palette. The second floor volume is clad in the Shosugiban, but all the carve-outs we did in a white cedar. So it felt like a black monolith that was carved away. We did that on the interior as well. So this combination of a black stained oak, I believe, in this case, and teak. that idea of the tokonoma that I mentioned in that early slide as you walked on the site of the house in Palo Alto. Again, a riff on a Japanese concept where you create these architectural opportunities for display. So that opportunity may have a character on its own, but more importantly, it's an opportunity for the client to express themselves, make the house theirs. And in this particular client, he wanted a black house, and he also is trained as a stand-up comic, of all things, but his true passion is cooking and entertaining. So instead of a traditional dining room, we don't have that. We have a bar height counter around which you sit, and this is his space, his happy place, where he gets to stand, talk to his guests, cook, prepare their meal, and look out at the Silver Lake Reservoir. We also wanted to work with what we call, or whom we call, East Side artisans. So in this case, a tile maker. Another view of the island, the kitchen. This is my client posing for the photograph and his dog. And you see, from this particular vantage point, he has a view over the reservoir. Again, the architecture is not about the architecture, it's about creating a vessel for the client and the things that he brings to the home, and also a frame. It's a frame of reference, so it kind of reminds him where he is, whether that's talking about his path on his life's journey or his particular address in Silver Lake. So this is the last house I'm going to talk about that I designed for a client, and you'll see why I say that maybe in 5 minutes. But in the meantime, this house is a house that we did in Aspen. It was just finished. I was there just a couple weeks ago for the housewarming party. And to me, again, this is another photograph, and I should have mentioned the photographer's name. His name is Ishimoto, trained in Chicago, but went to Japan to photograph Katsura Palace for Tange Kenzo, a famous Japanese architect, and also Walter Gropius. And I just love this photo because it's not like the usual photograph of a tree you would take. This tree in particular, over which man has very little control, is at a diagonal in juxtaposition to the architecture. So this house is very much about that juxtaposition. This house is on Prospect Park, which, for those of you who've been to Aspen, is walking distance from downtown Aspen. But the lots, again, not unlike Venice, are not that big. But what we wanted to make sure to do was for the house to really embrace nature. So this is a view from the park looking at the house. You can see the juxtaposition of the trees with the architecture. So from the second level, you have a sense of privacy. This is a view from the primary suite looking towards the back. So you have a view of the trees while cropping out the views of your neighbors. Very open. We're able to do that. But on the ground floor, it's a different story. So we want to bring in natural light. Again, this sense of komorebi, this dappled light. So we developed it, but also maintain a sense of privacy. So this is on the side yard facing another house, as a matter of fact, maybe maximum 16 feet away. So we developed this pattern, which is both this, on the right is an example of it cut out of steel, and on the left is a frit pattern that we put on the glass. And we modeled it, again, using grasshopper on this idea of aspen leaves. So the shape actually is a reference to an aspen leaf, and then the variation in the density is a reference to the quality of light you get through a canopy when the trees have leaves on them. So this is a very, very exposed second story at the top of the stair, open study area where the client takes Zoom calls. He loves being able to look out and see Prospect Park across the way, see the snowfall, appreciate the aspen trees, but also wanted a veil, a sense of privacy. So it's that juxtaposition between the architecture and the view beyond that, to me, animates the space. On the ground floor, the sitting room, that window with the pattern on it is a view directly to Prospect Park. Actually, at times, this is a deployable screen, so it can open up so you have an unfiltered view of the park. But for much of the time, if they're entertaining and it's at night and you can see into the structure, they wanted this, again, a veil, a sense of privacy from the public. Some other shots of this in the stairway. I'm talking too fast. A shot down the stairway. Again, stairs for us. I mentioned before that I like the architecture to be quiet, not steal the show. Absolutely true. I'm not making that up. But the stairs owe us an opportunity to have a little bit of fun and create a sculptural element within the house. So this is a stair that goes down into the basement. Again, I mentioned that these lots are not huge, so many of these houses have basements to provide enough square footage for the program that these clients need. But many of these basements in touring the houses I found to be quite dark. So in our case, we created a big void in the primary space and this pretty generous light well. When we photographed the house, we timed it well. We just started to get this light snowfall. So it's kind of like being inside a snow globe in a way, but the snow globe is actually the world outside. So this is a lounge area, a common place in between the guest rooms and the basement through which you get to see the snowfall above against the aspen trees, but below. So now we're in the basement falling into this light well. And a random photo of, just to speak about the materiality of the house for a second, they fell in love with Vals, Switzerland, and so this is a Vals stone. Some of you may know the thermal baths by Zumthor in Vals. They use this exclusively, this local stone from Switzerland. I'm going to go back for a second. I forgot to mention, so in the main space we used a basalt because basalt is more local to Colorado. So we always like our architecture, although there are through lines, there's a relationship to nature, an honesty of materials, but we always like the architecture to be a reflection of the client, of course, but also the place in which it is located. So we don't have a common vocabulary in terms of whether it's details, but in particular materiality. We always like to contextualize the work. Bring something new to the table, but have something there that's familiar. But also, as a reflection of the client's interests, this is an opportunity. This is a guest powder or a guest bathroom that also is a steam shower that provides an area for spa. Have a reference to the client's histories and what they love. So this is a little nod to a particular trip that they enjoyed in Switzerland. Oh, there's one more house, I lied. This is a house that, very special to me, limited photographs, you'll see in a second, that we did in Japan. So not far from where my family is from, on the Pacific Ocean side, in the Bay of Sagami. So again, it kind of comes back to, that's an image by, this is an image by Sugimoto on the left, and then two photographs of an architectural project that this particular artist that I admire did in the Bay, and it's all about, again, this riff on how an architecture can be a framework for the people, but also a particular place on the planet. So this is a house from the water side. I was excited to work in Japan. Japan famous for, you've probably heard of Tadao Ando, but poured in place concrete. Japanese contractors have sort of mastered that building material, so I was very excited to work with it in Japan, but also give it a California twist. So this particular client reached out to us because there's no shortage, believe me, of architectural talent in Japan, as all the architects in the room know, but he wanted someone who understands building on the water. So he found us somehow a blend of an architect who understands how to build facing the Pacific Ocean, but also maybe had insight into Japanese culture. So again, this composition using the poured in place concrete, this was fun for me, so I really wanted to use Noguchi lamps, but this is a 3-story tall entry vestibule, so that includes first floor, second floor of the house, and then an elevator that pops up to the roof deck. And there was no Akari lamp that we could find that would scale well in this space, so instead we hired an artist and collaborated with them to do sort of a contemporary take on an Akari lamp and a Isamu Noguchi lamp. He's also a fan of mid-century modern architecture and European architecture, so he requested that we design a pattern that was reminiscent of the Eames or perhaps Riefelt or Mondrian. So this is what the team and I came up with, and what is it for? Well, in Japan we have a lot of mosquitoes. So in California I like to convince our clients not to do bug screens, but in this case, since as a little kid going to Japan every summer, I knew that there were a lot of mosquitoes, so we decided maybe a bug screen was necessary. So we designed that pattern particularly to use for the screens. So that's the client. And these can pocket away. So we like this pattern as this veil in between the ocean. It, again, is a way for the architecture to contextualize nature, but also we love the fact that it can pocket away and you have this unadulterated view. Again, the architecture, it's about proportion, it's about simplicity, providing a framework for the view and a vessel for the client's life. In this case, a collection of Charles Generet and Noguchi and maybe Jean Prouvé. I'm not sure if I see Jean Prouvé in their furniture. So this is looking back into the space, and that wavy view you see is not a window to that, but it's a polished stainless steel that we use for the backsplash. So I knew that for this island that the guests would be looking at the host, looking away from the ocean. So I wanted there to be, again, this architectural way to always keep in mind where you were. Always keep in mind that you were right on the ocean in this case. Just a little funny thing about it is this client in particular, he's in the music industry, fashion industry, has a lot of kind of very interesting and celebrity friends that he would have over, but he wanted them, instead of providing a number of guest rooms, because there was limited square footage, he provided for them these capsules. So in Tokyo, you have these capsule hotels near train stations for businessmen or college students or whomever who missed the last train, and you rent one for like $10 a night or something like that. And hopefully you're not claustrophobic and you climb into it. But he wanted to recreate that experience for his friends. So he has 8 guest rooms. 8 guest room, 9-bedroom house. This is the client walking up. I wanted to do, again, these double height architectural walls. My local architect was telling me that the code for guardrails was not 25 feet, but what I wanted to do is use the architecture. Take advantage, first of all, of this amazing craftsmanship in concrete, but also use the walls on the left-hand side is this very minimal, abstract framework for the horizon. And then this is a view, again, things that we can get away with when we're not dealing with the UBC, no intermediaries. There's a guardrail height, but nothing in between. But this abstract pattern as a framework for the horizon line. So the last project I'm going to talk about is an interesting one, and it actually has a tie to Omaha. I don't know how many of you know, I'm guessing most of you do, Tom and Ross and my friend Mike Nesbitt from LA, who created Maple Street Construct. Thank you again, Omaha and Maple Street Construct, for having me here. So, Myers Street / So there is a architecture magazine. So this is a legendary publication that was done mid-century in Los Angeles. It was eventually the sponsor for the case study program. Interestingly, I'm involved in a rejuvenation of the case study program since maybe you heard about the fires that kind of ravaged parts of Southern California in January. There's a new case study program that is helping the folks in the Palisades and Altadena who lost their homes. But that's whatever, a side note. An advertisement for modern e-combs. So these modern e-combs were designed by Gregory Ain. And most of you have never heard of Gregory Ain. And there's a reason why. So Gregory Ain was inspired by Schindler. He worked for Neutra. He worked with the Eames, incredible architect. But at a certain point, when he first went off on his own, he designed houses for people who were fortunate enough to be able to afford those, but very quickly wanted to pivot and provide modern architecture for the masses. So he spent most of his career concentrating on apartment buildings and housing tracts for the working class. And one of these tracts is in Mar Vista, which is close to my office. I've had an eye on this neighborhood for 20 years. This tract was built in 1948 for mostly aviation industry, post-war aviation industry employees, and it is a fascinating community. So you get a hint of it on the left. That floor plan, minus the garage, but that floor plan is identical for every house in the tract. And then you have a two-car garage. So it is the various ways in which the architect sited the house. So sometimes, if we're going to call this a bar, parallel to the street, sometimes perpendicular to the street. So sometimes the front door opened onto the street, sometimes you had to come along a side yard and enter the house. And then the relationship between the house and the garage also varied. So when you drive down the street today, you get a sense that, oh, these are all mid-century modern houses, but you don't really know until you know that they were all designed by a single architect. So this is the floor plan. Very modest size. The original houses were all around 1,000 square feet. And they're what we call 1 to 3 bedroom houses, which is a little hard to explain, but they're deployable and movable partitions that allow it to be either a 1 bedroom or a 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom configuration. This is an example of one in the neighborhood. This one, a slight riff, similar but not the same. So you didn't feel like you were buying a commodity house. So this is the footprint of mine. It's on Meyer Street. This is an image of the original house. So one of the interesting things, true or not, I'm not sure, but let's go with true. Gregory Ain was one of the first to experiment with an open kitchen. So this is a half open kitchen. So on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side, we have the living room, sitting room, very modest in scale, too small, in fact. And on the right, on the other side of that wall, we have the kitchen. And in between, at this pass-through, we have a dining table. So and it accommodates 6 diners. So 3 diners are going to be sitting in the living room, 3 diners are going to be sitting in the kitchen. Kind of an interesting idea. I'm not sure it entirely works. Anyway, so this was the house when I encountered it when it came on the market 2 years ago. It looks better in the photographs here than it actually is, and I'll explain why. This floor, this lovely wood floor, is not a wood floor at all. It is a ceramic floor, like, you know, a very inexpensive kind of Home Depot floor. Might work for some, did not work for me. I felt that it wasn't appropriate for the spirit of the house. And likewise, you can see what he's done with the dining table. He's raised it to counter height, which functionally works fine, but he also ripped out the original cabinets and replaced it with these very inexpensive cabinets. So fortunately, the house was not modified enough to speak to a young family who wants to live on the west side. And it was adulterated enough where it didn't speak to the purists. But I saw an opportunity here and I jumped on it. And that explains the birth of Myers Street, whatever you want to call that, slash. So shout out to Maple Street Construct. I think it's kind of a direct ripoff of Maple Street Construct. But the spirit of it is that Myers Street, I wanted to create a space that was about community. It was about conversations. It was about provocations even. But it was about bringing people together. And so Myers Street I see as the locus for that. Like as I mentioned, it's a jar. So it's a jar for all my stuff, but it's also a vessel, or it's also a stage or a framework for these conversations. So the slash then represents the open-endedness of what this house might be on any particular day, evening, moment. Myers Street could be, for example, Myers Street AIA, or it might be Myers Street Omaha. You're all welcome to come over anytime. So that's sort of the spirit of how I use this house. So what I did with the house once I acquired it is I took away all the things that I felt were unnecessary or inappropriate interventions, as nice as they may have been for some people, but they didn't speak to me. So this is the first room I did that in. I took away the floor, so that is the raw floor with the markings of the various floors that have been there. And I think when I say various, there are only 2 floors that have ever been there. You can see maybe very faintly a grid line, so those are original tiles, and I'm told they were asbestos tiles, so I'm happy that they aren't there, but also vestiges of the glue that held down that faux wood ceramic tile. And then I was hoping where you see the newer 2x4, so on the left side you see the 1948 framing, on the right side you see newer 2x4 framing. That originally was the location of one of these transforming walls. So I was hoping behind the drywall it was buried in there. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But again, I'm letting this project, this house, since I don't have a client, be my sandbox. So I'm just messing with it, for lack of a more sophisticated architectural term. And then I invited Mike Nesbitt, who many of you know, I was hosting an event for SF MoMA, and to me the architecture was enough to have an interesting conversation and be a site for great dialogue, right? I was using the house as a didactic text for these conversations. And it felt kind of empty, so I just wanted to borrow some art. But instead, Mike took it a step further, and he created a body of work in conversation with the house. And it was fantastic. So that inspired me to continue that tradition and use the house as an art site or a community site. So some images of these paintings, what he calls paintings. This is another artist's friend. So the second iteration, I invited some other artist friends to take spaces over. So I won't go too deeply into her art, but I gave her this space. And this particular person is an emerging artist who, after decades working in a family business, kind of decided to re-embrace her art. So again, no gallery representation, any of that, but I provided, or Myers Street provided an opportunity for her to reconnect with that side of her. So again, this is what I purchased. So you see the floor, you see the green lawn beyond, you see maybe a hint of this canopy, a funky yard back there, and I stripped it away. So a few things happening in this image. You see the raw floor. This is a sort of an action piece, a sculpture that was done the day of the exhibit by Mike Nesbitt. You see also on the left-hand side an exposed wall. So I knew that this space in particular was a 1960s addition to the original house. And I knew that that corner, if we go back for a second, was originally the outside of the house. So I wanted to see what was underneath. So you see there that sort of turquoise, blue-green color was the original color of the house. Color was another way in which Gregorian differentiated the different houses. And then that plywood was where a window was. And people are early on constantly asking me, so what am I going to do? What am I planning? What floor am I going to put in? And I just kind of shrugged. And I have no idea still, but I think for the time being, and that time being might be a long time, I'm leaving it. Because again, I'm noted enough to have whomever decide that it was a good idea for me to show up and talk to you guys. But I don't know if I'm ready to do something inappropriate in this environment. So I'm just letting it be. I'm just taking things away and letting the house have a conversation with my friends and these guest artists to come over. So I wanted to show this. It's not a great photo, but that is Mike's first piece. So you see that on the wall there. That is in direct conversation when he came over for a cocktail for me to kind of, my ulterior motive was to ask him if I could borrow some art. This is what he decided he wanted to have a conversation with, right? So the artwork that's hanging on the wall, on the white wall, is a piece that is in very deliberate conversation with my exposing this corner of the house. So this is an image of other things that it evolves. It's also an archive for me, so it's Meyer Street Archive also. It's a way in which, so there are 3 generations of artifacts here, my grandfather's, my father's, and my own. It's just a way for me to not have to store it, not have to give it away or throw it away, for me to have time to digest my personal lineage and also to share that with any guests that come over. So this is a piece, a wheelbarrow piece, found object piece that Mike did for this year's iteration of this collaboration. And again, it's an alternative art space at times. It's not a white box, right? So it coexists. I mean, it's not the comfiest living room, but it coexists with some of my personal furniture and effects. You know, you see a guitar there, you see empty boxes, you see my books, you see design objects that I love. So I love that it's bringing together, even within the design or the book or writing, music, fine art, sculpture, sometimes we stay too much in our own lanes. So this space is a space that can bring all those kind of disparate communities together. Another view of that space. Another iteration of it. So this was for a photo shoot, and they didn't love the wheelbarrow, so forgive me, Mike, we took the wheelbarrow away for a minute. And so this story was more about me and how I use the space, so kind of foregrounded instead of the art, everything that I brought to the table here, including cars, so guilty pleasure, I'm kind of a car person, so this was for an ad for a Porsche magazine, so somehow I was able to maneuver that car into the backyard, and we took a photo of it. But I also used the space, again, this empty vessel as not just for visual art or static art or architecture. So we invited a Heidi Duckler dance, who in LA is famous for having dance performances just once, one of a kind, in conversation with architecture. So this particular troupe, there are maybe 4 or 5 dancers. These are just a couple shots. Were given the house as a stage. and I let them do whatever they wanted and just crossed my fingers that they weren't going to break anything, and they didn't. But it was a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. So in that same space that I showed that I had taken out the floor, this is a second generation. Topher Chin, a friend of mine again. This artwork kind of speaks to the fires in many ways, and also fences, because Gregory Ain, and I'll show you in a second, was about fences, but it seemed like, rather than using this for a guest room, I thought, why not? Like, this is a different kind of guest. And this is the view from the guest room. So that smaller piece is looking at a cousin, which is in the backyard. So this is the piece in the backyard. So now you're getting a little bit of sense of also these amazing mature trees. You'll see both of them, but I'm blessed with these two 75-year-old, or maybe they're 76 now, year-old Chinese elms that again bring in the stappled light that I'm so in love with, that create these outdoor rooms that were planted in 1948. Garrett Ekbo was a landscape architect, mid-century modern architect. You've heard of EDA, which maybe no longer exists, but a massive landscape architecture firm. Ekbo is the E in EDA. Trained in Japan also, so just spoke to me in various levels. So this is the yard when I bought the house. It's hard to see, but there was a defunct koi pond and a funny little gazebo in the back, lawn, a fence that was about to fall apart. And what I've done is remove things, it's erasure. So I was just trying to create a blank canvas without knowing what I was going to do with it. And then the Santa Ana winds came. So you can see that I've taken things away, the gazebo, there was a funny brick-lined planter. I've let the grass kind of, go dry. The Santa Ana winds came, which are a late summer wind. It can get pretty intense, and it blew down that 75-year-old fence. So Gregory Ain, when he conceived of the tract, I forgot to mention that he had socialist leanings. He really believed in community. So when he designed these houses, he didn't want them to have backyard fences. So the backyard was a shared community space where the kids could run around and all the different moms and dads could, keep an eye on the kids collectively. And each house had different fruit trees, so you could share your fruit with your neighbors. This is LA, so very quickly, all the houses have fences now. But this was an interesting moment after I acquired the house. The Santa Ana winds, after I tore down the gazebo, which was apparently holding up that fence, knocked the fence down. So for about a 3-week period, I got to enjoy this sort of conversation with my neighbor. And she liked it too for a moment. But in the end, we decided, maybe privacy is not such a bad thing. So a fence was built. And then I also decided to build a platform, what I call a stage. So some people will call it a deck, I call it a stage. So again, this outdoor room that I was blessed with underneath the two Chinese elms provided an opportunity to invite different kind of artists. I mentioned the dance group earlier. In this case, this is our friend George Coe, a pianist, concert pianist, who travels the world, but felt that it would be fun to do something for, an audience of 40 in the neighborhood. So these are the sort of things that I like to host at Meyer Street. And I think these are some last images of the current exhibition. It's there now. If any of you are in LA in the next 3 to 4 months, who knows? This might be here for years, who knows? Feel free to reach out, and if I'm around, I'm happy to show you around. And I'll end with this slide. So this is a hole in that corner that I excavated. I think of it as an archaeological dig. So, obviously the contractor, when they made this a living room, they needed a light switch. So they punched out these holes in the stucco walls. And amazingly, there was Gumby in there. It's crazy. And back to the tokonoma idea. So many of the things I talked about in this image, I hope, filtered in the conversation or the monologue, I guess, in this case, this evening. And that's it. Thank you. So I went a bit over, but.
Oh, you're good. We have time for questions.
Yeah, if there are any questions. Don't be shy. Well, I see a couple hands, so.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Do you have a favorite of the ones that you just showed us?
House?
Yes. Or favorite project of the ones you showed us?
So it all depends on the lens and the perspective. So I have favorites for various reasons. So they're favorites, as I organize the images. I try not to make it a comprehensive walkthrough of a project, but use the aspects of a project to illustrate sort of a concept or idea. So if you were to talk about materiality, then yes, maybe I have one or two favorites. If you're talking about this idea of komorebi and the dappled light, I have other projects. I like to think that most, not all, but the vast majority of my clients are lifelong friends, and all these projects are near and dear to me, so at least publicly, I could not say that I have a favorite. Yeah.
I bet Meyer Street's your favorite.
It is, Meyer Street is, so if there's like sky, ocean, or yin yang, or the two faces of Janus to any individual, glass half full, half empty, or whatever, Meyer Street, for me, has been a wonderful outlet for things that I don't get to do in daily practice. And it's not to say that I like it better. It's a sandbox. It's a way to operate as an architect or a creative or a writer or thinker or whatever I'm masquerading to be, that I don't have the opportunity to do when I'm doing projects for amazing clients. But this gives me a kind of freedom. It also allows me to engage other creative people or fans of all these disparate genres that I wouldn't necessarily be able to do otherwise. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So with Meyer Street, with all these different events and changes and things that are happening, are you trying to document that? Or do you prefer it to just be a moment in time that you experience and that's it?
That is a great question. I don't know yet. It's only been Meyer Street for a year, and I've only had the house for a little less than 2 years, and it's evolving, and I have a day job, and I'm pretty busy at the moment. So I've